Hey guys, I've got a huge training tip for you that you need to hear before your next backpacking trip. It has literally changed how I train. It's changed my total physique and how I am able to prepare for hikes and what I think I'm gonna be able to do on hikes. And I think it's gonna do a massive amount of good for you guys. So in this video, we're gonna talk about the best tip I've ever had for you to train and be ready for your next hike. If you're new to this channel, we're Outdoor Vitals, and our whole channel is about getting you outdoors more comfortably and more confidently, and this has a lot to do with that. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe down below, and let's dive right in to the problem. The biggest problem I've seen with training is that the best training you can possibly do for something is go and do the exact thing that you're training for. Well, backpacking is usually an all-day event. You're walking all day long, you're covering 15 or 20 miles, and it's hard to go and duplicate that during training. You don't have the kind of time. The other big problem that I see is without training, people go and they get on trail, and pretty soon they have to get off trail. In fact, it was really sad. We met someone just on our last company trip where he'd taken 6 months off of work to go do a through hike, and before the first week was over, he had to get off trail because he had some issues arise from previous injuries and things, and he had 6 months off work, and so he was going around and doing other stuff. But that dream hike of his, that through hike, was over, and this happens time after time. Whether it be something more like the John Muir Trail or some trails we have later this summer that are 100-mile trails, trying to do those types of trails without training is no good. You can have the best gear in the world, but without that training, you are still going to have issues potentially arise and not be able to go and do those trails. So there's a massive problem because we don't have the time, but we absolutely need the training. You might be able to relate to me a little bit in the sense that you give yourself about an hour a day for physical exercise. And typically what I do is I'd go to the gym and I'd work on functional fitness. I'd do kettlebells and lots of body weight type movements and bands and different things like that to be really functional and increase my strength. But the fact of the matter was, it still wasn't doing what I really needed it to do on the trail. So you're probably asking, what the heck is it that you are teasing out here? Well, a while back, if you haven't listened to a podcast episode we did with Jeff Peltier, who's a YouTuber and is also a trail runner, a racer, a fast packer. We had a podcast with that, and that really changed the course of this entire summer for me. I had to start trail running so that I could be ready for this fast pack. Now, for those of you that don't know, fast packing is essentially hiking, ultralight hiking, but doing it at a much faster speed. You're jogging the flats, you're running the downhills, and you're just hiking those uphills. But I needed to start training for that, so I started trail running. And that's it, guys. Trail running is the key. Now, before you turn off this video, because you're probably like, I'm not a runner, I'm not a trail runner, let me tell you a little bit about my history, all right? I grew up a lineman in football. We don't run. I grew up a thrower in track. We don't run. And I also grew up basically anytime there was like a gym setting where we had to go run a mile, my only goal was to try to run that mile without stopping. I failed way more than I ever succeeded at running a mile without stopping. Because I'd get side aches, and I just was not a runner. I have so much resistance to running. I hate running. I hated running is what I should say. So if that's you, just know that this can still work for you because it has for me, and now I love running. How did I go from never liking running to going and doing stuff like this and loving it? Step one to me is set your goal. Now, if you've got a good goal, you always are able to do the why. For me, we set a goal to do this fast pack, which is something I'm really looking forward to. And then because of that, we also set this goal to do what's called the Uinta Highline Trail, which is over 100 miles. 85% of it is over 10,000 feet. It's brutal, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And I have not done this hike, even though it's been the #1 thing on my bucket list for years now, because I thought that it was gonna take me between 7 and 10 days. And that's a lot of time for me to take away from my young family and my wife. But now looking at it a different way, we should be able to do this in 5 days and be home that much quicker, which now makes this a reality for me. So we set these goals, and those goals have driven me throughout the entire summer. Step number 2 is do not worry about the mileage. Just if you're anything like me, you had no baseline. You have no baseline of running. And so how do you start? Literally, you can start by running 100 yards at a time, walking 100 yards, running 100 yards, walking 100. And when I say running, I mean the slowest jog you can imagine. but just start doing miles. You start setting that up, and then from there you add about 10 to 15% more per week. The key number here is watching your per week mileage. If you start to watch that, you might start at 1 or 2 miles for the week. From there, you just try to add about 10 to 15% week over week, and that's gonna be your best case scenario to ramp up your mileage and avoid injury. And that really brings up the next best question, which is what about injury? Well, I have found that trail running, yes, it's shed some light on some injuries, but it's allowed me to work through those, and I'm stronger than I've ever been. In fact, my knees and my ankles and my back and my hips and everything is way more mountain ready than I've ever been in my life, and I'm 30 years old right now. And that's a really, really cool experience, and it's something that came though. It came through a process. And I'm gonna talk about that in another video because I did develop injuries, things that were already pre-existing that just come into light. But guess what? Those would have come to light on a 100-mile trail anyways, and they may have been debilitating enough that it would have taken me off trail. In this scenario, I'm able to bring those up, face those, and work through them to where now I'm running with no knee pain, I'm running with no back pain, and I'm just stronger than I've ever been. And so I will cover those details in a separate video. I don't want to distract too much from this video. What trail running really allows you to do is it allows you to take and condense a backpacking experience into a much tighter period. Now for me, I put between 5 and 10 pounds typically in this fast pack that I've got on, which is just basically a vest style pack. And I'm taking that and then I'm running. And now again, I'm usually allotting myself 1 hour a day. And so in a 1 hour period, I'm typically getting between 4 and 5 miles with about 1,000 feet of elevation gain. Now I'm getting elevation up, I'm getting elevation down, and I'm logging miles, which are all amazing things. This routine for me has been amazing because all I've done is I've changed 2 to 3 days a week that I used to go to the gym, and I've moved that now to trail running so I didn't lose any time, but instead now I'm logging 15 miles a week with 3,000 feet of elevation, which is some great training. And then from there, you're able to ramp that up to where, like today, now once a week I'm trying to get out and run at least a 10-mile run and log all that, and I'll be back in my office before 9 a.m. in the morning. All right, so there you've got it. You know what you need to do to start. You know you need to set a goal. You know you need to just get started. And you know that doesn't matter where you start, it just matters that you keep doing it and building. But what that's gonna do for you is it's going to make things possible that you just did not think were possible before. I promise you that. Try this out. Go do some trail running. If you don't have trails near you, find the next best thing. I've run through parks in cities. You know, some of these bigger cities have really nice parks and they'll have some hills at least, so you can run the hills. You can do some different things, but get creative, but start logging miles, because the big thing here is logging miles. This has been the single biggest tip that I've ever had, and the single biggest thing that I've seen some amazing benefits from it. One, I love running now. I really do. I don't know what's changed, but it is a good time. I have seen massive improvements in my body. I've lost over 20 pounds to this point just in the last 3 months. Plus, I'm about to go do 2 of the best hikes I've ever done in my entire life, and I'm stoked for it. Now, if you're interested in seeing how those hikes go, to make sure that this training really does work, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we're doing something called a Hardline Challenge that we will roll out, where we've got a series of events, both the training aspects and going and doing these big 60+ mile fast pack and 100+ mile through hike. So make sure you're subscribed as we go through those. Check out how this training does for us. The whole office has been doing it. We've learned a ton. Anytime you push yourself, you're going to learn something new. And I promise you, you are going to like what happens to your body and what you're able to do if you start using this tip. So set your goal and just go log your first mile.